What's up guys, TechLab here. Now in today's video we're going to be doing a bit of a test. We're going to be challenging the GTX 1080 Ti against the newly released Alan Wake 2. The reason that we're doing this is because number one, we have a GTX 1080 Ti loaded into our benching rig at the moment, and one of our channel followers actually paid for the game for us to do this. We will be testing it with the game as it is, as well as trying to test it with some mods that have come out there, just to see if they can actually fix the performance issues. Okay, so the graphics card that we've got today is the GTX 1080 Ti, and it is the Founders Edition. I actually collected some of the NVIDIA cards, particularly on the 80 Ti series, and this is one of them that I actually picked up. It is a decent graphics card. It has been repasted. It is working at its peak performance, but it doesn't actually meet the Alan Wake 2 requirements. Alan Wake 2 was recently released, and it created such a fuss within the PC community, mostly due to its unbelievable requirements that actually exclude most of the PC community, so there wasn't a lot of happy people out there. But we've got the card loaded up into the system and we have the game installed. Before we actually try any kind of modding, what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can actually get the game to load and see how well it performs on its own. Now when you first start the game with a GTX 1080 Ti, you are actually going to get this error message. It says that your GPU does not support the recommended features. In particular, it's the mesh shader, but it will allow you to continue. All you have to do is hit OK. One weird quirk to Alan Wake 2 is that once the game actually starts to load, maybe it is because of this graphics card, I don't know, it does actually minimize itself, so if you are looking for it, it is actually just down there in your taskbar, so just give it another click and it will actually open up. When I first tested this game, I did get issues when running MSI Afterburner, particularly with the overlay, because it gave a different error saying that you just need to disable overlays just to be able to get it to start. It is a bit of a weird error because it actually says it's unable to communicate with the Epic servers, which is strange that an overlay can cause that, but strangely enough, after a couple of reboots, it seems to work perfectly fine now. So if you do get that error message, just disable your overlay and then just restart it once you're actually in the game. It should work fine then. Now that we're in the game, we can see that we've got a consistent 60 FPS. This is obviously just in the menus, but we'll pop over to the options and we'll see what settings we're currently running in. We are currently running in a full screen display mode with a display resolution of 1080p and also a render resolution of 1080p as well. For resolution upscaling, we currently have FSR2, although I don't believe that this is actually enabled because it isn't a toggle system. It won't actually let you change it. I do believe that if you change the render resolution to something else where you've got your performance, your balance, your quality settings, that's actually going to really enable FSR2, or at least use that API to be able to do that work. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave it as native and we're going to see how well it performs just like this. We currently have VSync turned off. I don't like motion blur or film grain, so I've turned them off as well. And we're running in a high setting. This will give us a great benchmark to see how well the game performs. Now that we're in the game, we can see that it actually doesn't look too bad. The game looks reasonably good. I wouldn't necessarily say it looks next gen, but we don't actually have a lot of things enabled really. And we're currently getting on average 18 frames per second. That's not great, but again, this card doesn't meet the minimum requirements of the game, so the fact that it's actually playing and it's missing some of those libraries like mesh shaders, it seems to be a decent enough gaming experience so far. You just probably wouldn't want to play the game like this. We are now moving around looking at more and we're still getting around 18 frames per second. The constant is increasing a little bit when we kind of look into the sky. We're getting up to 24, 25, but I wouldn't say it's actually something you would want to play. See if I can get the character to run a little bit and we'll get into a bit more detail. Now we're starting to drop our FPS a little bit. We're now currently running at 17, so not a great experience, but at least the card loaded the game. So let's see if we can mod it and see if we can actually improve that performance. Now without any modding, the game actually managed to get around 18 frames per second on average, just in that small piece that we were actually testing. I don't suspect it's going to get any higher the further we go through the game, so it's enough for us to just test to see if we can actually get any kind of improvement through mods, if anything at all. There is a page currently on the Tech Power Up where somebody has actually gone in. It's a forum post and discussed what kind of modifications you need to do. So that's what we're going to actually follow, and we're going to see if we can actually get that performance up. According to the page, it's very simple to be able to do this. They have included a bunch of files at the bottom that you can download to try this on, and they've given some simple instructions in between all of this text on what you need to do. Now it says here what they did to get it to work was just drop these DLL files into the game's directory, and then everything should work. They have provided multiple different files just in case things don't. And again, if we do get any kind of issues, they've also given us some kind of instructions here on different things that we can kind of try to get the game to load if it's not going to load. If we do kind of fall into that trap, we'll see what kind of happens. I have already downloaded the files before. They are sitting in this temporary directory, so all we need to do is go find the game directory, which is here, and then we'll just drop these files in and we'll see what happens when we try to load the game. Now the game is trying to load and it appears to have crashed. We've actually gone back to the Epic menu now. It's syncing with the cloud, and so I don't think that those files are going to work. So let's try a different set of files. There are multiple that have been included, like I said before. We also have these ones here, so we'll try these files and see what happens. This one does come with the config file as well, so maybe that was our issue, but let's try it again and we'll see what happens when it's using these files. Again, the game has started to try and load and then everything's disappeared and we're back to the Epic launcher. So again, those mod files are not working either. We'll try one more time because we do have a different set. We'll take these files here, we'll drop them into the Alan Wake 2 directory, and then we'll kickstart the game again and see what happens. Now, unfortunately, we seem to be kind of falling into the same trap here. Everything starts to try and load and then the game crashes and we're back to the Epic menu. So if we just head back to our web page, we'll have a look at some of the things that we need to do. Step one that they've actually given us here is to be able to change the swap chain method on the NVIDIA control panel, or AMD if it exists, so we could try that. Number two is disabling the NVIDIA overlay. Now I don't have the overlay running because I don't install NVIDIA Experience. I've just literally got the driver, so that's not actually going to change anything. Make sure that you have the Vulkan drivers installed, and then again they do mention this at number 12. You can try installing the Vulkan drivers and the runtime installer. We can try all the files and versions that were actually provided to us, which we have done. So number 4 is ticked. Change the settings in the dxvk.config. We could try that. They talk here on number 6 about having a 64-bit version of the OS, which we do, so we don't really need to do anything about that. And there are a bunch of other things. So what we'll do is we'll try a few of these things and then we'll see if we can actually get the game to start at all. So after trying all of the things that they actually suggest that you can do, we still cannot get the game to start with any of the modded files. And sometimes this is what happens when you do try to mod a game. They just simply don't work, or at least they don't work for everyone. I've never really had that much success when trying to modify games. I don't know why. Lots of other people do. Maybe they just have a lot more patience than me in being able to kind of configure things and play with things and things like that. But I really don't have the patience for on this game. I wasn't really intending on playing it due to the lack of support that they've actually provided to the community. Even though I did love Alan Wake, the original game, maybe I'll get round to it one day when they've done some fixes or something like that. But apart from that, I'm not really that passionate about the game to get into it. But what we can do is we can actually see what does it take to actually get this game playable on a GTX 1080 Ti. So what we'll do is we'll actually delete those config files and DLLs. We'll get rid of them altogether. The game shouldn't be modified now and it should start perfectly fine for us. So we'll kickstart the game up and then we'll see what happens when we actually start to configure some of the graphical settings. Let's try and get this card working and get a playable experience for everyone. So we're now back in the game and we're still getting at 18 FPS and we're actually getting some terrible frame rates here of 54 milliseconds. It's not looking good, but then we knew it wasn't looking good before. So let's head off to the menu and see what we can do to adjust things up. If we go to graphics settings, the first thing we'll do is we'll obviously turn down the quality preset. Let's try it on a medium, although texture resolution I want to set to medium too. That's of course going to set it to a custom. I'm going to just go down and set everything that I can to either a medium setting or low setting if it doesn't give me the option. We'll keep clicking and that's pretty much all of them. Let's head back to the game and see what kind of frame rate we're getting now. It has increased slightly. We are getting now 20 FPS, so it hasn't really done a lot at all. 21 as we walk around. It's a little bit smoother, but again, you probably won't want to play at this. And visually, it looks okay. There's not really major issues with it. It doesn't look like an obvious next-gen title now, but of course it isn't when you start dropping those settings. But we'll go back to the menus and we'll see what happens if we drop things even further. Going back into the graphics settings, we'll set everything to a low setting. This should be low and medium across the board, which it is, although scattered object density seems to go to high. I think what we'll do is we'll just set that to low as well. It's probably going to hit our kind of graphics quality quite a bit, but we'll see what happens when we go back to the game. So now we are still sitting at 21 frames per second, just dropping the graphics quality from a high setting on everything all the way down to a low, and the game does look terrible, or quite terrible now compared to what it should. We've actually gained no additional frames per second at all. That kind of does smell a little bit of a game that is not exactly well optimized, because we should have had a bit of a difference here. It should perform much better with a lower setting. So the only other thing that we can try is going back to the graphics settings and enabling this FSR2 functionality. To do that, we'll go to render resolution and we'll set it to one of these. We'll go for a balanced setting to begin with. That should balance everything out, and we'll see what kind of performance we get. Now we're back in game. You can clearly see there are some very deep visual problems here. It does not look good at all. It's starting to look very much like a last gen console. Does that mean it's not playable? Of course not. Of course, last gen consoles were even playable, but our performance still hasn't increased that much. Now we're getting an average of 25 frames per second. So we've managed to gain, what, 5, 6, 7 FPS by literally dropping everything to the lowest that it can. The only place that we can go now is if we go back to the options, graphics settings, and we'll set the render resolution all the way down to ultra performance. That means that the graphics card is going to be rendering a picture of 640 by 360. You know, do we really want that in 2023? It's not really a good place to be, but we'll do that anyway. And it should be upscaling it to 1080p, and we'll see what kind of performance we get there. The game now looks absolutely terrible. It's very blurry when you kind of turn. You can see a pixelation around pretty much everything, the characters, the trees, the grass, and we've still increased by only 1 FPS. We're now running at 26 frames per second on average, with the continuous actually floating between 29, 25, depending on what we're looking at. If we look right at the sky, we can get a look at 30 FPS, but we're not going to play the game looking at the sky. So in actual fact, if you are a user on a GTX 1080 Ti, this is probably not the game for you, unless you can actually get those mods to work, which do promise that you can actually double your frames per second on that. So you could probably get a decent experience if you can get them to work, but it's not going to work for everybody. Then you might get away with it. But unfortunately, if this is the type of game you want to play and you have a GTX 1080 Ti, it's either time to upgrade or wait for them to kind of fix the game, because you definitely know there will be some performance kind of updates coming, because they're going to be missing out on a huge marketplace to obviously sell their game. So that is our look at Alan Wake 2 on the GTX 1080 Ti. We did have the card loaded into the benching system for a reason, and that was actually for a different video. We're going to be testing this card against other 2023 games, ones that actually perform way better than this one. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to catch that. It is a card that I've really been looking forward to getting into and testing. So I'm going to enjoy that video. Hopefully you guys will too. I want to thank the guys on Twitter, or X, for kind of sponsoring this video and providing the game for us. Maybe we'll include it in some of our benchmarks going forward. I don't know yet. Maybe we'll just add it into the test suite and see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the game, Alan Wake 2. Is it something that you've picked up? Are you impressed with the performance, or are you disappointed like many others? And I'm sure, as always, we will catch you guys in the next one.